Senate will come to order. Senators will be in their seats. Clerk will call the roll.
Ellie. Baumgartner. Billinger. Lazy. Bowers. Clays. Corson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Fag. Faust-Goudot. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Holland. Holscher. Kirshen. Cluse. Longbine. Masterson. McGinn. Olson. O'Shea. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Pittman. Pyle. Reddy. Reichman. Schallenberger. Steffen. Straub. Sykes. Thompson. Tyson. Ware. Warren. Wilborn.
Senators and guests, please rise and give prayerful attention to our chaplain.
Blessing to be back. Heavenly Father, I thank you for another opportunity to serve. This is another day that had not been promised to us as we daily face dangers, seen and unseen. A year ago, Lord, you chose to deliver me from the grasp of the COVID virus, and here again, after spending a few days in the hospital, I was touched by your healing hand. You've blessed me with some friends who believe in the power of prayer, and I thank you for their prayers. You protected me, my wife, and my daughter from facing the severity of that virus. Lord, we all face dangers that you protect us from. And when you don't protect us from them, you protect us in them. You have given us those powerful words of encouragement penned for us by David in the 23rd Psalm, words that have blessed us through generations. Help us again to find comfort in the message of those words. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to his name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me, good God Almighty, by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessings. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. I offer this prayer in the name of Jesus. Amen and amen.
Please remain standing.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On a point of personal privilege, Chair recognizes Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, for those who don't know, who haven't been to my office, there is a picture on my office door of my father, retired Colonel James Pittman, who had just graduated from West Point Academy when he was about to head off for his first tour of Vietnam. On my back window, I have another picture of my father-in-law, retired Lieutenant Colonel Wayne Shehorn, in his helicopter helmet on one of his 4 tours of Vietnam. I don't have guests here today, but I have guests across the state of Kansas, about 150,000 veterans. Today, March 22nd, marks the annual observance of Armed Forces Day, as well as Vietnam Veterans Day. On this day, we, the Senate, we express, I think collectively, our deepest gratitude to all those who have served our country, and we pay tribute in particular to the courage and sacrifice of all those who served in Vietnam. We remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice and gave their lives in service to our nation, and we honor the resilience and strength of all those who returned home after enduring those horrors of war. Our armed forces have always been a symbol of hope, strength, and freedom, and we are grateful for the soldiers who have selflessly dedicated themselves to defending our nation, and we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to our veterans whose service and sacrifice helped shape our country and protect the values we hold dear. Today, I also thank the military members, past and present, who came back to Kansas to serve in this great body, this Kansas Legislature. I encourage all Kansans today to take a moment to reflect on the sacrifices made by our veterans, our Vietnam veterans in particular, and I say again, welcome home. Mr. President, I just ask that my words be spread across the journal.
So ordered. And actually, thank you for bringing that. We truly do owe them a debt of gratitude that we cannot repay. We're now ready for final action. On this roll call, we'll take the following: the consent bill on page 2 and 3, HB 2197, HB 2262, HB 2332, and the measures on page 4, SCR 1607, House Bill 2015, House Bill 2020, House Bill 2065, House Bill 2089, and House Bill 2090. Clerk will read the titles.
House Bill 2197, an act concerning financial institutions. House Bill 2262, an act concerning public health. House Bill 2332, an act concerning the Division of Tourism. Senate Resolution Number 1607, a concurrent resolution making application to the Congress of the United States to call a convention for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution of the United States that impose limits on the federal government. House Bill 2015, an act concerning public health. House Bill 2020, an act concerning motor carriers. House Bill 2065, an act concerning family law. House Bill 2089, an act concerning insurance. And House Bill 2090, an act concerning insurance.
Clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Baumgartner. Billinger. Lazy. Bowers. Clays. Corson. Dietrich. Dahl. Erickson. Bag. Faust-Goudot. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Holland. Holscher. Kirshen. Cluse, Longbine, Masterson, McGinn, Olson, O'Shea, Heck, Peterson, Petty, Pittman, Pyle, Ready, Reichman, Schallenberger, Steffen, Straub, Sykes, Thompson, Tyson, Ware, Warren, Wilborn.
Has every senator had an opportunity to vote? Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey. Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Fauci-Do. Are there any explanations of vote? Senator from Finney, Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to speak on SR 1607. The Constitution of the United States cannot be blamed for the problems that we have had and continue to have in Washington, D.C. The framers of our Constitution, in their great foresight, produced a document that has been the longest lasting Constitution of any democratic government in the history of the world. The unintended consequences of the Convention of States could be harmful in the long term. Speaking with proponents of the Convention of States, asking their thoughts on how long a federal senator should serve, the overwhelming answer was 12 years for a federal senator. If this same rule applied in the state of Kansas, 15 of our current senators would be termed out in 2024 election. I don't believe our Senate would be as effective, missing 15 senators in our next session. For this and many other reasons, I vote no on Resolution 1607, and I'd like to have my words spread across.
So ordered. Further explanation? Senator from Reno, Senator Steffen.
Thank you. I vote yes on SCR 1607 because our federal government is out of control. And Article 5, Convention of the States, is our best opportunity to right the ship before it sinks or is sank. Thank you. Yes.
Would you like your remarks on the journal? So ordered. Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. President. With his permission, I'd like to join the comments from the senator from Finney.
So ordered. Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Haley.
I too, Mr. President, would appreciate the senator from Finney allowing bipartisan support for his explanation of vote on the SCR.
So ordered. Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. With his permission, I'd like to join the remarks of the Senator from Reno, Senator Stephan.
So ordered. Further explanation? Does anyone wish to change their vote? Seeing none, clerk will close the roll, tally the vote. Thirty-three having voted in favor and 5 opposed to House Bill 2015. 35 in favor and 1 opposed to House Bill 2020. 36 in favor and 2 opposed to House Bill 2065, 2089, 2090. 36 having voted in favor and 1 opposed to House Bill 2187. 38 having voted in favor and none opposed to House Bill 2262 and 2332. These measures, having reached their constitutional majority, are hereby declared passed. Notwithstanding the U.S. Constitution, SCR 1607 failing to receive the required majority under the Kansas Constitution is hereby declared lost. Apparent correction, and I don't know if it's my dyslexia or my vision, what I announced as 2187 was 2197, 36-1. Before recessing, are there announcements? Senator from Lyons, Senator from Lyons, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's a number of senators on my row that are wishing to know what the vote count was on 1607.
22 in favor, 16 opposed. Are there further announcements before we recess? Senator from Sherman, Senator Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just want to give a heads up that Ways and Means will be meeting tomorrow at 10:30. Thank you.
Further announcements? Seeing none, Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Republicans will caucus upon recess in 5:48, and I yield to the Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Democrats will caucus in room 287 North upon recess. I yield back to the Senator from Cali.
Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate recess to the sound of the gavel.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Senate's in recess.
Senate will come to order. On a business of consideration of motions to concur or non-concur, the chair recognizes the senator from Sherman, Senator Bellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move the Senate non-concur in House amendments to Senate Bill 229 and request a conference committee be appointed.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carried. The chair appoints as conferees on the part of the Senate the senator from Sherman, Senator Bellinger, the senator from Saline, Senator Clays, the senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty. The chair now recognizes the majority leader from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move the Senate resolve itself in the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders.
You have heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. The chair appoints the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The Senate, having resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole, will now consider those items listed on the calendar under the heading of General Orders. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2092. The chair recognizes the senator from Miami, Senator Baumgardner, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2092 is a bill that addresses an issue that occurred when we did our redistricting. Most of you know that Washburn University has a Board of Regents, and those appointees in the past have been based on Senate districts. And with the redrawing of Senate districts, it made that very difficult and cumbersome. So what this bill does is it sets up 3 districts, and voters will vote based on the city council districts. And that addresses the way in which they came up with that solution is because there will be representation where each of the different Washburn University facilities are located. And I am happy at this point in time to stand for questions.
Are there questions for Senator from Miami? Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say that the Shawnee County delegation is in complete support of this bill. It came over from the House. The House Shawnee County delegation over there presented the bill. This is a great solution to an unintended consequence of redistricting, and it's a very fair division of the population in the county for Washburn Board of Regents. So I just wanted to thank the senator for bringing this bill forward today, and hopefully it will pass favorably because we're all in support of it. Thank you.
Senator from Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask that we pass over the bill without objection and then come back to it.
Is there objection? Seeing no objection, we will pass over House Bill 2092. We will now turn our attention to House Bill 2093. Chair recognizes the senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine, to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2093 will sound very familiar to this body as it is identical to Senate Bill 28, which we passed out of this body 39-1. It establishes a process to refund fees that were paid by group-funded liability pools and group-funded work comp funds. Those fees have not been collected since 2015 in fee funds. It totals about $153,000, and this bill would allow the insurance commissioner to refund those fees back to the groups that paid them. Our committee felt like this bill was extremely important. We wanted to get the money back as fast as possible, so we changed the bill to the register. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Questions for the senator from Lyon? Senator Finney, are you seeking recognition? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2093 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries. We'll now turn our attention to House Bill 2094. Chair once again recognizes Senator from Lyon, Senator Longbine, to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, Senator, motion carries. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2094 once again will sound very familiar because it is identical to our Senate Bill 26, which we passed out of this body 38-1. The House passed HB 2094 124-0. It changes the reporting requirements for projections from monthly and quarterly to annually for HMOs and MPOs. Once again, our committee felt like it was extremely important, so we changed the enactment date to the register, and with that, I'll stand for questions.
Are there questions for the Senator from Lyon? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move with the committee rise and reports. It reports House Bill 2094 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Now turn our attention to House Bill 2130. Chair recognizes Senator from Johnson, Senator Warren, to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2130 comes to us from the House. It does concern the Kansas Probate Code, and it increases certain dollar amounts in the code. Some of the dollar amounts have not been increased since 1994. The most recent increase was 2008, and it does take into account inflation and other matters regarding small estates. Claims against a probate estate was brought to us by the Kansas Judicial Council. It doesn't change any processes other than if you are going to have to give notice by publication. It changes some dates to allow the fact that with changes with the time, some legal publications aren't published weekly anymore, so it would require, you wouldn't have to start your publication within 10 days, it would be 30 days. And in committee, we also put a time deadline when you would have to have the hearing that you are noticing up. The court would have to have the hearing within a certain time. And also, if you're going to sell real estate that's involved in a probate matter, the court would have to order that the sale date be within 30 days after the last published notice to provide some finality and closure for Kansans when working through these probate estates. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would stand for any questions.
Any questions for the Senator from Johnson? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2130 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. We'll now turn our attention to House Bill 2131. Chair once again recognizes the Senator from Johnson, Senator Warren, to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2131 comes to us from the House with near unanimous support, and it is a minor change to the Kansas Judicial Council and its mission and duty to assist in the administration of justice in Kansas and make recommendations for improvement therefore. It is a 10-member council created by statute. 2 of the 10 members are the House and Senate Judiciary Committee Chair. Another member is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. There are at least 1 appellate court justice on the council as well, and some practicing attorneys and other district court judges as well. So it merely changes and updates their mission statement. The Kansas Judicial Council does not anymore survey the judicial branch. That's kind of an outdated linguistic statement, and it's been changed to provide more modernization. And the committee felt it was important enough that we would have its force and effect upon publication in the Kansas Register. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd stand for questions.
Are there questions for the senator from Johnson? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2131 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. We'll now turn our attention to House Bill 2042. Chair recognizes Senator from Shawnee, Senator Dietrich, to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2042 is a self-storage bill. It came to us from the House, and it's a bill that just will allow simply our self-storage operators to have a motor vehicle or a watercraft, think a boat, or a trailer removed from their property by a KCC certificated towing company, and then that towing company, that towing operator will deal with the property as they currently do. So the purpose of this bill really is just so that self-storage unit operator can remove property that's in default. It's been there for 60 days. It came over to us at 45 days. We added a few more days because we didn't think 45 days was enough to allow them to remove that property after many notifications to the owner or the renter of that storage unit and the owner of that property. So they just want to move the property out of that storage unit so that they can rent it to the next person. So this bill passed the House 123-0. There were no opponents. This language matches 45 other states' language. So it really is just a benefit to those storage business operators, storage operator businesses. Maybe I said that backwards. That's primarily it. And I'll stand for questions.
Questions for the Senator from Shawnee, Senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong support of the bill. I think the Carrie did an excellent job explaining the bill. This is basically allowing specifically for those vehicles and others objects that are basically have to be towed out on a trailer. This is actually allowing them to free up that space so they can basically have somebody else put to better use. So anyway, would suggest your support of the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there further questions for the Senator from Shawnee? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report House Bill 2042 favorably for passage.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. We'll now turn our attention back to House Bill 2092. Chair recognizes the Senator from Miami to stand for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I stand for questions.
Senator from Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment.
You turned it in?
I have.
Do you have the number?
1806.
Give us a moment to get it distributed. Senator from Lynn, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this amendment would do is implement some common sense. We have a regent that is demanding that students in the architectural engineering field that are working on their degree would be required to take a test and pay for a test that they do not need to pass, but they have to take it before they can get their degree from the university. So this just says that the university cannot require them to take a test that in order to get their degree. They get their degree, and then if they choose to take the test and become certified, that's on the student. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Questions for the Senator from Lynn? Senator from Leavenworth, Senator Pittman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to challenge germaneness on this.
Mr. Chairman, that's fine, I'll withdraw my motion, but I want to make a point here that this is critical that we address this issue with our university, and I will withdraw my motion.
Motion to amend has been withdrawn. We're back on the bill. Are there further questions for the Senator from Miami? Senator from Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sometimes we don't get a microphone to talk about the issues that we need. I know we need to stay on the legislation that we're on, and I get that this is for Washburn. But when we have egregious overstepping universities, we need to rein them in. And I was hoping that the body would allow a little leeway, but knowing the good senator from Leavenworth, he always pulls that card whenever able. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Further questions for the Senator from Miami? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the amendment. We will keep that language if Senate Education Committee is able to incorporate that into a shell that has other higher ed rats and cats. We certainly will try and do that. I am familiar with the situation, and again, this is a university requiring a student to take an exam, an external exam for licensure, and they don't care whether the student passes the exam or not, but that is the path to earn their degree. So we will address that if we have the time this week. Mr. Chair, base bill, House Bill 2092, resolves an issue so that there is appropriate and fair representation for Washburn University. And I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report House Bill 2092 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. We'll now turn our attention to Senate substitute for House Bill 2344. Chair recognizes Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey, to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is a Senate substitute bill, so there were amendments. I ask that we adopt the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Childcare. Childcare is an issue that we've all been hearing about for a while now. It's become a crisis here in the state of Kansas. It doesn't affect one entity or one group of people. It affects all populations. It's affecting rural. It's affecting urban. It's affecting all demographics. Every corner of our state is being impacted by childcare, which therefore is hurting our workforce. It's hurting young families. And in the last 5 to 10 years, we have seen the Department of Health put more and more restrictions on providers in the state of Kansas. You know, because of these restrictions, we've lost hundreds of providers over the last several years, and therefore we've lost thousands of spots for Kansas children. And just here, I want to say, according to a June 2022 report from Child Care Aware of Kansas, between 2019 and May of 2021, Kansas lost 78 total child care providers and 938 total child care slots from the total desired capacity of all programs in the state. In 2020, Kansas child care licensing renewal dates were extended due to COVID, but when the extension ended in June of 21, many programs closed. From June through August of 21, Kansas lost an additional 279 programs. And family child care homes saw the steepest decline in supply overall, with a total decrease of 115. Child care in Kansas is one of the most expensive in the entire nation. And in fact, here in the region, every surrounding state is cheaper than the state of Colorado. And as a percentage of state median income, child care in Kansas is as expensive as the state of New York. So in this bill, you know, this bill is just the first step in trying to address the child care issue. This isn't the one solution. This is part of the solution. It's the regulatory side, and it will have immediate impact for the state of Kansas. When my wife and I adopted our second child, he was 1 year and 4 months old. And we called nearly a dozen facilities in Sedgwick County looking to place him in childcare. And unfortunately, the wait list was 1 to 2 years at every single location. And unfortunately, in our hometown, my wife's hometown, we were able to find a home daycare provider who was able to watch him until we could get through a list. So this issue is impacting many families. So we didn't get the traditional 9-month wait that a lot of people get when they find out they're pregnant. And so unfortunately, because of the lack of slots, Kansas families are having to wait, which is pushing young families out of the workforce. We have a good friend in the northeast part of the state who is a medical provider. And unfortunately, they had a child last summer, and they were on the list, got their child in daycare after 12 weeks. The child was there, KDHE came in, and the ratios, I guess the staff were a little overworked, so they put some restrictions on them. And the kid was kicked out. And that provider has had to leave the medical field. And I think we all know every field in the state of Kansas is experiencing major staff shortages. And of all the fields, I would think medicine would be one that we'd really want to ensure we're at full capacity. So in this bill, we address several things. In Section 1 is the training requirements for our program directors. And what we did was in this bill, we broke it down into 3 different groups. We have facilities or child care centers that are licensed for fewer than 18 children. That's one group. We have one that is between 18 children but fewer than 36, and then one that is centered for license for 36 children. And this bill has different requirements for to become a licensed daycare program director based on certain different criteria they can meet. And what we did with the criteria, based on current regulation, was adjust some of the experience requirements from 6 months to 3 months, some of the requirements for education hours from 7 to 9 credit hours to 6 credit hours, for training for classes that are touching childhood development, early childhood education, curriculum resources. And ultimately, this was to increase the pool. These changes are increase the pool of number of qualified candidates to serve in these roles. Because right now, it's so restrictive, and we're hearing from providers that with about 3 months, you're able to tell if someone would be a good fit for the classroom. And so some of these restrictions, lowering these restrictions is to increase the number of applicants that are qualified. We've heard all the time from providers that we have people who have worked as an early childhood education, as an elementary teacher who wants to move to an early childhood education center and unfortunately cannot do some of the requirements. And so these restrictions are to increase the pool and level of field of study to allow more persons available to work into this field. Section 1 also limits the Department of Health and Environment to not be more restrictive than what the statute allows, as well as the 18-year-old to be a lead teacher in the classroom. We heard from providers in the original bill that 14 was a little young on some of our assistant teacher positions, and so we adjusted those based on provider input and raised it to 18. I want to really bring to the attention of the body that this bill has been worked on, spent many countless hours talking to countless providers, countless parents all across the state who gave input. And I believe this bill is a good bill because the opponents of this bill, we gave them the bill weeks before the bill was introduced, hoping to get input. And unfortunately, we didn't get to an agreement. However, we believe that we have to act today because we have to be responsive to the needs of our citizens. And what we're hearing from our businesses, from our parents, from our providers, is things must change. And that is why we're here today with this legislation. On Section 2 of the bill, this is child care home ratios. So current regulations has group homes, daycare homes, and we're merging them all into one. And they are now child care homes. We have 1 provider or 2 providers, and that's how the ratios are based off. Currently, if you have 1 provider, it's 10 is the maximum capacity, as well as only 1 to 3 infant ratios. This bill increases it from 1 to 4, which puts us in line with the rest of the nation. 64% of the states in this country have 1 to 4 ratios. In fact, the other 30% have 1 to 5, 1 to 6, and some even 1 to 7. Kansas, Maryland, and Massachusetts are the only states in the union that have a 1 to 3 ratio. And on 2 providers, we increase the capacity to 17. We believe naturally that if we're going to have 2 providers, we should increase the capacity. So that's what Section 2 does, is addresses home daycare child care homes ratios. The bottom of page 4 addresses some of the specifics in terms of what happens when there's no school, let's say during the summer break or the winter break. It allows 2 or less children who are at least 5 years of age to be at that child care home, which allows parents who have maybe a child in that child care home who maybe has a first grader who needs child care in the summer, they can now join that home with their sibling. So that parent is not struggling throughout the summer and school breaks to find a location for their child. Also in Section 2, it prohibits the Department of Health and Environment from being more restrictive, and it also preempts local governments being more restrictive. In my home county of Sedgwick, the largest city of Wichita, just up until today, had very stringent policies and even were more strict than current state regs. And so one criticism of this bill has been that this bill is lowering the annual education requirements for licensure. Currently, the law or regulation requires 16 hours. And Mr. Chairman, this bill brings it down to 12, a reasonable reduction. Because before 2017, we had 5 credit hour requirements. And over the course of the last 5 years, they incrementally have raised them up to what we see today at 16 hours. This is 12. This is reasonable. And it allows flexibility for people to use programs that are offered by the Department of Health or another external partner using 4 hours. So it increases flexibility for our providers who are already stressed with having to, with their daily management of their child care home, as well as trying to keep up with the regulations that are put in place by regulators. Section 3 touches our centers, ratios on centers, and there's been some slight adjustments, 1 or 2 slots, nothing, again, unreasonable. It also prohibits the Department of Health and Environment from being more restrictive, and it also preempts local government from being more restrictive. Section 4 of the bill requires that a program director or an administrator is required if there's a facility, child care facility that has 75 children or more. It's currently 60. We've increased that to 75. Section 5 of the bill deals with the fire marshal, that the child care center must meet local regulations with the local jurisdiction. It also increases or lowers the square footage to 28 from the 35 current. This is to help adjust with some of the ratios. Section 6 of the bill does not require the residency of a licensee. So we've heard from providers who are either wanting to rent a facility. I've heard this from Wichita provider who wants to rent a facility, but Department of Health says you can't do that because you don't live there. This will allow them to do that. I mean, of course, they have to meet the current other standards for safety, but allows them to do that. And we have one provider back home who wants to rent out a duplex, live on one side, and make the other side a home child care center, and therefore, current regulation does not allow them to do that. So this bill, that Section 6 would allow them to rent out one side of a duplex and live on the other if that's what they choose to do. Section 7 gives flexibility to the Secretary to waive requirements. Another criticism I've heard is we need flexibility. If you put this in statute, there will be no flexibility for us to adjust to the needs of the population. And I think Section 7 addresses that concern. Because if you have a 2-year-old, for example, actually, I have a 2-year-old in a child care center here in Kansas. When our newest child arrives in June, and eventually they move over to the centers, my wife and I are both working, that child, let's say they're at the ratio requirement, that child will be able to go in if the Secretary deems it's necessary and may issue that waiver to increase the ratio just a little bit to meet the need of that particular family. So that family is not running around looking for child care for that one child. Section 8 of the bill is a pilot program. We're all looking for ways to be innovative and increase child care in the state of program. Section 8 empowers that, empowers the department to do that. Section 9 of the bill is a lot of pages. It's all current law. Section 9 of the bill is current law, and it just puts child care providers to match it and include them in our occupational licensure statutes. When a military family moves to Kansas, whether it's McConnell in my community or Fort Riley or Fort Leavenworth, wherever it may be, if their spouse or someone is working in child care and they want to be able to transition into Kansas child care, we want them, like all the other occupations that are included in the statute, to have an easy transition so they can get into the classroom or home daycare and be able to help provide those services. Section 10 of the bill clarifies that a child care facility does not include drop-in programs. This might come as a shock to you, but we have a lot of after-school programs, before-school programs, summer programs, and they use a lot of these same facilities that schools are in. We have Boys and Girls Club, we have the YMCA, but unfortunately KDHE has been unwilling and is trying to regulate them as if they're a child care program instead of a drop-in program. So this bill, Section 10, will help clarify that drop-ins are not childcare and therefore are sinners and should not be under those same regulations. Section 11 of the bill removes the $150 fee to get a license. This is hopefully an enticement to encourage persons to get involved and open a home childcare. The penalty, however, of $75 will stay in if they do not meet the requirements timely on renewal. So there is still the penalty. And Section 12 is just some miscellaneous cleanup language, because believe it or not, this is one thing we heard: toothbrushes. After every meal, every snack, regulators in Topeka have decided that we need to put a toothbrush in every child's mouth after a snack or a meal. And unfortunately, it's become burdensome for our providers. And so it's just one of the miscellaneous things that we're trying to clean up. So, Mr. Chairman, I really appreciate all the stakeholders who came and spoke on this bill, pro and opposed, because I think we all care about one thing, and that is childcare for our children. We want safe, affordable childcare for every Kansas child, if that's what the family chooses. And I want to ensure that we do that. And Childcare Aware estimates about 85,000 Kansas children do not have access to childcare today. That is sad. Think about how many families are being pushed out of the workforce because we have 85,000 kids who do not have access to childcare because they're on long 1 to 2 year wait lists, because they don't maybe have a location, and because the restrictions are so stringent. This bill is reasonable, and it puts Kansas within the average of national norms on standards. And so, Mr. Chairman, I will stand for questions.
Thank you. Before I recognize the senator from Douglas for questions, I would like to remind the body, as we get down to the end of the session, we get real passionate about our issues. Let's try not to impugn or question the motives of another member of the body. Chair recognizes the senator from Douglas, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And may I inquire, were you impugning that I might be throwing some firebombs?
I was not.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. Body, the bill you have before you today is a very bad bill. I do want to give the Commerce Committee, though, a little bit of credit, because before you see it in its current bad format, it was actually a very terrible bill. Originally, when this bill came to us in the Commerce Committee, we had language in there that would allow 16-year-olds to basically be the supervisory management of certain types of facilities, getting certain type of numbers. This bill has nothing to do with making safe childcare options available for our Kansas families. This is all about deregulation. I mean, let's face it, the Kansas Chamber and childcare, that's not an easy mix. And what has been left out of this discussion is the real stakeholders of this bill, Mr. Chairman. Senate Substitute HB 2344 amends the Child Care Act, but it includes portions commonly referred to as Lexi's Law. Here are my major complaints about this legislation. Number one, they're trying to put rules and regs into statute. That is a bad thing when it comes to being able to respond and be responsive to the situation when it comes to Kansas kids in child care facilities. Okay, we can't afford to have the legislature reconvene once a year to clean up all the unknown consequences that this bill is going to cause in its current form if this is to be implemented. I was particularly disappointed in the committee working this bill and moving it forward from the standpoint, Mr. Chairman, that we had the executive director, Melissa Rooker there, of the Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund. And she informed us, Mr. Chairman, that in December, their agency had gotten a $4 million preschool development grant, and they are currently right now using those monies to engage outside consultants to look at our child care rules and regs. And the executive director pleaded with the committee to just give them enough time, just let them get through the interim, And they will come back well before next year with a report on their findings of the analysis of the current child care rules and recommendations on how we need to go forward. The other point I wanted to make about this bill, and I guess basically my final concern is that we need to allow the experts to weigh in on this. Now, the comment was thrown here about basically, we've lost so many hundreds of slots or whatever, a couple years ago. Let's keep in mind what has gone on. Everybody had to deal with COVID-19. I'm sure that didn't just decimate Kansas daycare providers. I'm sure that decimated daycare providers across this nation. And quite honestly, Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's a genuine argument to somehow insinuate that because of onerous rules and regulations that all these child care providers went out of business, within the past 2-year window. It has really nothing to do with it. What this bill before you would basically try to sell you the elixir of, hey, if we just somehow have more slots, more kids per cribs, less square footage per tot, that things are going to be great. We are not looking at all here, Mr. Chairman, on the issues that really matter. How do we get more pay into these facilities? How do we get the educational, the training needs that we need to get these people in here so we'll be sure kids are going to have a good experience? And quite honestly, I don't trust the Chamber of Commerce to come up with those solutions. They're looking at a bottom line. When we talk about child care, we are truly, Mr. Chairman, talking about the legacy of our kids. I'm a grandfather. Now, I have 4 adult kids. They're all grown. But I have 5 grandchildren. And numerous of my grandchildren attend child daycare. And my number one concern about those kids, as my parents are, is that they are in a safe, monitored environment. Because make no mistake, Mr. Chairman, every day in a daycare, whether it's in Kansas or in Iowa or Missouri or anywhere across the country, every day some little kid experiences mental trauma, they experience physical trauma, they experience sexual abuse, and that's one of the things I laid on the desk. Is what I wanted to point out is what I'm really feared about is that when we talk about basically reducing staff ratios, when we talk about watering down overhead, when we talk about cramming more kids together, bad things happen. We had a thing, Mr. Chairman, in Lawrence, Raintree Montessori. And let me tell you, the rich people, the people with the dollars, that's where they put their kids in Raintree Montessori. Okay? I mean, it is a top-notch facility. And yet last year, there was a worker that was charged with sexually abusing children. This bill is not going to fix that issue. It's going to exacerbate that issue. So I'm going to vote no on this bill, Mr. Chairman, because I want my grandkids to be safe. I want everybody's kids and grandkids to be safe in the state of Kansas. I want to hear from the experts of what Executive Director Rooker and others say. I want to give them the time and the consultants time to come back and provide recommendations and really tell us what they think we should be looking at. Let's give them that chance. Let's give them a few more months so we can avoid the unnecessary mental trauma, physical trauma, and God knows what else, because we tried to slap something in the last couple days of the session. And once again, make no mistake, this will be in statute. This will be very hard to undo. And the so-called panacea of, well, we'll just have a special hotline that we can call up the secretary or whatever, and then she'll fix it on the fly, that's unacceptable. So I appreciate the body's indulgence. I strongly urge this body vote this thing down. Let's let the stakeholders do their jobs. They'll come back to us with recommendations that we can act on early next year, okay? The Senate can do much better than this for a work product. Thank you.
Senator from Center, you wish to respond?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, safety was mentioned, and that this bill was rushed in the last days of session. Here we are, you know, I want to thank the Senator from Shawnee, Senator O'Shea, who's also been working on this bill with me since the moment I got elected to the Kansas Senate. Safety has been the paramount of everything we do in this bill. And it's because we both have young children. I have 2 children, 1 on the way, and I wouldn't for a second want to ever compromise their safety. And when it stated that we need the experts in the room, this bill had the input of many providers across this entire state. In fact, Melissa Rooker, the Children's Cabinet, she testified as a neutral on the bill. She wasn't opposed, she was a neutral. It shouldn't be a partisan issue, Mr. Chairman. This should be an issue that we all can get around and hopefully find a solution. And talking about moving regulations over into statute, well, last year, if I recall from the opponents of the constitutional amendment that was put before the voters that says the legislature can remove and repeal regulations, it was said, well, if you don't like the regulation, you should just pass a bill. And that's why we're here today. We're passing a bill because the Department of Health is not responding to the crisis in Kansas. They're not responding to the workforce challenge. They're not responding to the needs of providers and parents. That is why we have this bill before you, because the Department of Health is not responding. Last year, they were before the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations on October 18th, 2022. They put forth many of the exact same things that are in this bill. They put before to change the rules and regs that are in the state of Kansas. And they said, and I quote, when they put forth in supporting those regulations, they say, in general, the proposed amendments would increase availability of care for children under 12 months of age. The availability of additional spots helps more families return to work and stay in their communities. There are no costs to parents associated with the changes to regulations. Parents will benefit with more infant care available, enabling them to go back to work. There would be no additional costs. Licensees would benefit as they would be empowered to care for more infants than they could previously legally, which could thereby help them stay in business and meet community needs for childcare. The proposed amendments are requested because of conversations had with childcare providers concerning barriers, and they responded stating that the current ratios and age ranges were barriers to their work. And they suggested the ratio and age range changes reflected in this document. That is exactly what's in this bill. Many of the exact same changes, Mr. Chairman, the same ratios, and the Department of Health supported them just 6 months ago and unfortunately withdrew them. The KU did a study with hundreds of providers across the state to discuss the situation in Kansas, and we read those responses. There's a crisis. These regulations are creating a major burden on them, which is why they're leaving the workforce. We cannot deny that the regulations is a part of the problem in the state of Kansas. We just heard that this bill is junk because apparently regulations shouldn't be touched. We should leave it to the regulators across the street where our constituents have no way of getting a hold of and voicing their concerns about this issue. They have us, the elected body, that represent the state of Kansas, the people, to help address this crisis. So, Mr. Chairman, I do think this is a good bill. There has been countless hours put into it, and there have been countless providers who've given us input on this bill. Thank you.
Senator from Shawnee, Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have an amendment.
Have you turned it in?
Yes.
Do you have a number?
Oh. 1803.
Give us a moment to get it distributed. Senator, you may proceed.
Thank you. We, as was mentioned, people who even still today oppose the bill, we spent time to ask them, we know you oppose this, but what edits would you make? What changes would you make? And we've incorporated many of those, including today. So today, a provider from Hays, Kansas helped us understand that the square footage of the outdoor area and current regulations is 75 square feet, to change that to 60 square feet so that they can, in fact, accompany the new ratio options. So that's part of this amendment. Sorry, that was the last thing. The other thing we heard from the YMCA, they said we would like for school-age children and kindergarten to have the same numbers. So making that 1 to 20, and then making it from 36 to 40. And then the last thing is that we've heard from the state fire marshal, and we want the state fire marshal to be able to have the authority to still carry out what they require at the state level. As in the bill, we already have that the local fire marshal trumps anything that might be in the bill that might be against what they have to say. With that, I will stand for questions on the amendment.
Questions for the Senator from Shawnee, Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Thank you. Would the Senator from Shawnee stand for question?
She will.
Okay, as I'm looking at this amendment, could you refer to on page 6 in line 9, you're changing the 18 to 20? Is that correct?
Yes.
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Again,
Senator from Wyandotte.
oh, I'm sorry. And could the Senator from Shawnee expound on that rationale for this?
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, so again, as we were looking through this bill this morning, the YMCA called. They said, hey, we really need for the kindergarten enrollees to be the same as school-age children. Can those both be 20? Adding up to, you'll see on the right-hand column side, the 40. So that was a request from our providers, and we wanted to honor their request.
Senator from Wyandotte.
And then that's the same justification for changing the 36 to 40.
Senator from Shawnee.
Correct.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Thank you. And then in line 29, I guess you're referring to the same page. You're adding state fire marshal in line 34. No, you're adding state fire marshal on line 29. Is this correct?
Senator from Shawnee.
Yes.
Senator from Wyandotte.
And then again in and then where are you? And then line 34. You're striking 75 and reducing it to 60. The outdoor space to 60.
Correct.
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you. And the justification for reduction of the outdoor space?
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you. So the providers, when they're looking at ratio numbers and they're looking at their square footage, they have to add up. So current square footage is 35 square feet. In the bill, it's 28 square feet for indoor. So this is what was needed to accompany the increase in a ratio of 1 or 2 students at most in most of these situations. So for 75 square feet outdoor, it was to go to 60 so that the outdoor space that people already have can also accommodate these ratio changes.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Thank you. Well, so as with this bill in so many places, and I will be asking some questions later, but this increases the numbers for kindergarten age children and it increases the total number. It's not based, as I'm hearing, it's not really based on, what are the best standards. In fact, as I looked at the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendation about ratios and amount of space, there's nothing there that matches what is the recommended. And generally, we want to be looking for more, not less. And then, so here this is increasing the number of children, but then reducing the amount of space. So for best practices, that's not the best practice when it comes to providing for quality child care, whether we're talking about an indoor space or an outdoor space. And just because an organization says, hey, it'd be a lot easier for us if we had the same numbers, then we don't have to calculate 18 or 20. We want 20 for everybody. That really doesn't talk about best practice. And KDHE, they are looking at providing for all, not just one organization that wants to have more after-school care. So I really question the need for this amendment. This bill itself has a lot of changes that are made, and now we're just doing another piece to increase the number of children in a situation and decrease the amount of space. I do appreciate that it has referred to the state fire marshal, because the state fire marshal should have be referred to at any time when we're talking about child care, but that would be the only one piece in this amendment that has any validity.
Senator from Shawnee, you wish to respond?
No.
Further questions for the Senator from Shawnee? Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just want to basically clarify the amendment that is put before us now in this bill was based upon a communication from earlier today or yesterday, if the carrier could clarify.
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's from providers that we've been talking to that we've been encouraged from the body to talk to.
Senator from Douglas.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, the question was when was the communication made for this amendment?
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For one of the pieces, yesterday. For another piece, Monday.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And not to belabor a point, but it strikes home. This bill is not ready for prime time. And I would just ask the body, my initial comments were we don't have all the stakeholders at the table. And obviously, we're having a debate here on the floor. Some of the stakeholders know this is going on, and that the last minute they're trying to change the bill, and now we're doing last minute changes on the floor. I would just respectfully once again request that we defeat this bill. Let's be sure the next time we do this, we have all the stakeholders in a position to provide input we need to get a quality work product. Thank you.
Further questions for the Senator from Shawnee? Seeing none, Senator, you may move your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We met with the YMCAs and have built relationships with these providers months and weeks before now. So this is an ongoing conversation. And to anyone who opposes this amendment, I'll ask you, have you spent time talking to providers and asking for what they want and need? And are you listening to their concerns and coming up with solutions, or just saying no? So with that, I move my amendment.
You heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. We're back on the bill. Further questions for the Senator from Sedgwick, Senator from Miami.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So 45 minutes ago, I received this message from a constituent. A couple of days ago, she says, I went through possibly the scariest time of my life. My 2-year-old son used to attend a daycare center in Lewisburg. He no longer does. I have taken him out of their program. On Tuesday morning, I dropped him off there, as I do many mornings. I went to pick him up after she got off work. and was told to come behind the counter, where I was told that at 7:45 a.m. that morning, a stranger walked into the daycare holding her son. The staff of the daycare had no idea that her son was missing out of their building. The classroom teacher was also not aware that her son had disappeared from the classroom. The stranger stated that they had to slam on their brakes to avoid hitting this 2-year-old as he was running across the street. The stranger stated that her son was cold and appeared to have been outside for some time. The staff of the daycare took my son back to his classroom and did not call or notify me. I was only told of the incident 9 hours after it occurred. The staff could not tell me how long my son was outside and out of supervision. The staff could not tell me how he was even able to get outside. So what assurance do we have in this bill that that form of negligence, as we are increasing the number of children that can be supervised, what assurance do we have that there won't be incidences such as this, or is this just a one-off?
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, ultimately, any parent whose child's missing, whether you're at the grocery store when you're getting groceries and your 2-year-old runs off, that's scary. Happens all the time to families, and it's scary. I'm sure at times things like this happen, and that's under current regulations. So this bill, again, is trying to address the crisis that's here in the state of Kansas. The ratio increases for home daycare providers, home child care facilities are increasing from 10 to 12 for one provider. 2 providers from 12 to 17. Child care centers going from 16 to 20 if you have school-aged. Infants, 1 to 4. These are 1 extra infant, 4 extra school-age children. These facilities have a lot of restrictions in place. They have fences around there, they have cameras, they have security codes. So what happened to this particular facility in I think, county of Miami, if I heard that correctly, is concerning. But there's a lot of regulations that are on the books that aren't going away to ensure that there are safety parameters put in place.
Senator from Miami.
So this isn't a grocery store. This isn't someone that just kind of stopped holding mom's hand. This was someone in a child care facility that is licensed, that is adhering to the ratio in current requirements. What in this bill increases any security measures? This facility does have fencing, but that's in the playground area. So what new security measures are in this bill so that when we increase or reduce the ratio between care provider and children, to make sure that we don't have an increase of these types of incidents?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Well, Mr. Chairman, again, these regulation ratio changes are put in Kansas with the rest of the nation. So if the senator is trying to imply that this might increase concerns for this incident to happen every day, everywhere, we must look to our 49 other sister states and see, why haven't they then restricted their state to the strictest in the nation like Kansas? Because if they would, if that was what needed to be done. This is putting Kansas, who has the strictest regulations in the nation on ratios, in conformity with our sister states.
Senator from Miami.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not implying anything. I am stating what occurred 2 days ago. And my question was, what has changed other than reducing the ratio? What has changed as far as policies and guidelines for safety and security?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Mr. Chairman, this bill requires that these centers, these children must be supervised by an adult. They must be in their presence at all times. It appears that this facility has violated current policy.
Senator from Miami.
So is there an increase in penalty for violation of these new guidelines?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Well, we all know our regulators are pretty stringent. You should just look at the KU feedback from providers across the state. Or we do have safe facilities. Regulators are on them all the time. This bill ensures we increase spots, and it does not change the fact that children must be supervised. If a child is not supervised, we're in violation, and regulators will address them in the appropriate fashion. This bill does not take away the regulators' responsibility for holding people accountable. So in this situation, if that's where a child is missing, KDHE will have to address that. This bill does not change that. This bill does not say KDHE cannot address safety concerns like that.
Senator from Miami.
Would the carrier of this bill please answer yes or no? Are there any increased regulations for those, or punishment or penalties for those that do not follow the regulations?
Senator from Sedgwick.
There are no penalties, increased penalties that will be put in statute to answer the question from the Senator from Miami.
Senator from Miami.
Thank you. I appreciate that we finally got there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator from Sedgwick. Senator Ware.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have all heard over and over again about our workforce issues, and clearly child care is a critical part of that problem, and we must address it, but this bill is not the answer. But I'll let some of the Kansas professionals who work as early learning educators who reached out to me, and I think everyone on the Commerce Committee, I'd be surprised if they didn't, let's let them tell their own stories. The first one says, I would reiterate that the biggest flaw I see with this bill is regarding the increase of ratios so that each teacher has more children to care for and educate. This will result in poorer supervision, more accidents and incidents between children resulting in injury, more squabbling between children, less time to observe, assess, and lesson plan, and less time to build relationships with individual children, individualize instruction, and communicate daily with families. It will result in increased stress and burnout among teaching staff, resulting in early retirements, staff quitting and leaving the field. A doctor, says, as a physician, this subject is deeply important to my profession. Having qualified safe childcare for my own kids is the only way that I have been able to practice medicine while being a parent. This topic is too important to breeze by without due diligence just to avoid regulation. A grandmother says, another emailer, after relaying her tragic story of how her 14-month-old granddaughter was accidentally killed in her home daycare setting, after she relayed that, she goes on to say, please vote no on this bill and turn your focus instead to making the role of child care provider a viable career option that allows for more child care workers to successfully enter this career field and provide for their own families sufficiently at the same time. Many of these folks are working at a minimum wage level, and they do it out of their heart, out of a passion for nurturing. Another woman working in the child care industry says, the licensing system is not broken. The system of support for folks who teach and care for children is broken. Respect the testimony and the views of those in the business. How can one provider caring for 4 infants and having up to 6 additional children be able to get all these children to safety in an emergency. From another child care field worker, there has to be a better way. A way that doesn't increase chances of injury, reduce quality education, or relationships with families, and doesn't result in early childhood providers quitting and leaving the field due to being overwhelmed. Kansas kids, another one says, Kansas kids and their family deserve quality, safe, and affordable child care. Child care providers, state agency staff, and community stakeholders are currently working together to make child care more affordable and available for families. Instead of supporting these efforts, this bill would create an inflexible and unresponsive set of standards and undermine the work of the child care community. So I think you can probably see some themes here. First, that we must keep our child care industry child-centered. Second, that the professionals working in this field are warning of severe burnout resulting in many leaving child care altogether. So bottom line, I submit that this bill would result in a shrinking of quality child care slots available to families, not an increase, due to the loss of workers. There has to be a better way, a sentiment that I heard repeatedly from Kansans who are worried about unintended results from this legislation. And there is a better way. We heard in the Commerce Committee that the Kansas Children's Cabinet is nearly ready to publish a comprehensive review. We could then move forward armed with a wide range of information and data. Why are we overreacting and rushing into legislation without consulting all the stakeholders and without the data that could soon be at our fingertips? Our Kansas children are at stake. Our future is at stake. Let's slow down, take a breath, hold an interim committee to really dig deeply into this issue and find a solution that is child-centered and worker-centered. There is another point, though, that I wanted to make. And in amongst a lot of other things, in an amendment that was put on just the other day, yet another occasion where home rule, a constitutional concept, is being ignored. This bill removes a community's ability to adjust their rules to fit their own situations. And that is unacceptable. Thank you so much.
Senator from Sedgwick. Senator from Sedgwick. Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll respond to some of that. Considering ratios, no one has to increase any ratios. Some of them told us, we don't intend to increase ratios, but think that this will help immensely when we have a sick teacher, or a teacher needs to step out of the classroom to go to the bathroom, or we're at shift change when sometimes there's less children than others. I have a survey here that was done by KDHE and KU, and there's 417 responses. What regulations present the biggest challenge to you in your business and why? There's 105 people who mention ratios, licensing capacity. We can take more kids, but we're not allowed to. So I thought I would read through them all for everyone. Just kidding. But I'll read through a couple of them. There's a serious shortage of daycare available for infants. No one will take them due to limiting our numbers. New parents cannot find daycare. It's a huge problem. If I have temporary overcapacity from new baby siblings to get approved, it takes too long. With so many daycares closing, I think the need to reevaluate each individual daycare provider's qualifications and adjust to a higher ratio of kids so that we can provide more care to children who are being left at home alone. So this is the point I think people are missing. The current status of the regulation around care is causing people to seek unregulated care. And so I would challenge anyone who's not, within the past year, dealt with some of their own children going through this process of knowing. So for 5 months, we didn't have full-time care. I would consider myself to be well-connected, called childcare where, got that list of 15 people. For 5 months, we were without childcare. We used friends, we used family, we used people from church. At one point, we used ks.gov, and we hired a nanny. So my question to the opponents is that safe? Is that safe? This is unregulated care, and so people are seeking those options. So I have to share another thing that a provider said. As a home daycare, I have to close if I have an appointment, even if it's only for an hour. The parents are not allowed to take turns to watch the kids for my dentist, medical appointments. And there's no way to find someone to watch children for an hour who's qualified according to the regulations. So what happens is all the parents take turns hosting all the children at their houses, and either my daughter or a babysitter goes to that house to watch the kids. Now, how is that safer? So I think we really need to think about what's happening here and how we're talking about what is safe.
Further questions for the senator? Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a question for the carrier of the bill. We're talking about safety, and I very much appreciated that the previous amendment referenced the state fire marshal. So can the senator from Sedgwick tell me how many non-resident children would be allowed in a daycare home by the Kansas Fire Code?
Senator from Sedgwick.
I apologize, Mr. Chairman. I didn't hear the question. Something about how many people allowed in a home due to fire code?
Senator from Douglas, could you repeat the question?
I can. How many non-resident children would be allowed in a daycare home by our Kansas Fire Code?
Senator from Sedgwick.
It's my understanding, Mr. Chairman, it would depend on square footage and ingross windows.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that there may be a limit of 12 in a residential setting. The alternative would be to have a daycare home that meets commercial code. I'm guessing that you would understand that to meet commercial code might require a number of significant changes to a residence, including changing the gauge on the electrical wires in that home. So one concern I have is if this bill would allow up to 17 non-resident children, we might be going beyond what our fire code would allow. And I'm not sure that in any way we're making that clear to the individuals if they're running that daycare home, if we're allowing them to have a license for up to 17 children and not stating that that may require a commercial setting. So again, I think that there are some things that need to be worked out. I guess just asking, did the committee consult the Kansas Fire Marshal regarding these restrictions and whether they would be allowed in residential or commercial settings?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Well, I mean, clearly based on the previous amendment, the fire marshal has had input on this bill. The fire marshal's safety regulations are going to supersede this. I mean, so if you don't have the square footage and don't meet certain requirements, the state fire marshal is not going to issue a license for 17 children.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Then I think it is very confusing to allow or to say that a daycare home can be licensed unless we're also clear that it might require meet commercial regulations. Thank you.
Senator from Wyandotte, Senator Petty.
Thank you. And would the senator from Sedgwick stand for question?
He's standing.
Thank you. one of the things that hasn't been touched on in the discussion is how does, how, there's not, you've never mentioned anything about the fiscal impact of this bill. So I would appreciate if you would go into detail about that.
Senator from Sedgwick.
Well, I guess per the Department of Health and Environment, they're saying $1 million from SGF. I mean, it looks like they're trying to say we're going to need 93 positions, which is interesting, since all we're doing here is adjusting current regulations on the books. I think it's not often, it's very common in this body to question fiscal notes. And ultimately, you know, we work with our counties to partner with us. Our counties do a lot of the regulations, like in my home county. We work with our own county which our counties are arms of the state. So our local regulators in Sedgwick County do a lot of these checks on behalf of the state. So I find it interesting that they're going to say we're going to hire 93 more FTEs and apparently $9 million. So I would question that fiscal note.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Well, I can understand that you would question it, but doesn't the bill speak to that now that KDHE would be the one providing the surveyors and not the health departments?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, that was with the surveyors in the bill. As we know, the Commerce Committee took that portion out, so I'll yield to the senator from Shawnee who addressed that issue in committee.
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That suggestion was brought by a House member, and we did strike it because we were surprised that there needed to be this many. We were told that KDHE had the positions already available. When they said they needed 93, we said, you know what, not a priority, and we struck that part from the bill.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Thank you. So the bill does not, so where do the surveyors lie right now within this bill?
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill does not touch any of the requirements of surveyors.
Senator from Wyandotte.
So this bill speaks nothing to the surveyors and has nothing to do with changing the surveyor, does this bill speak at all to keeping in place then the current status of surveyors?
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's somewhere in current statute. This bill does not touch that.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Thank you. My other question concerning concerning this bill and KDHE is how does their monitoring of child care licensing change in this bill?
Thank you, Mr.
Senator
Chair.
from Shawnee.
It doesn't.
Senator from Wyandotte.
There isn't anything different about in-service?
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you expand on in-service?
Senator from Wyandotte.
Yes, my understanding is that in this bill, now any type of in-service has to be run by KDHE instead of the current process.
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, we amended that part out in committee. If you want to see the old bill, I can show you where it's at, but that isn't what we're debating today.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Thank you. I'm looking at the current bill, and according in-service, I believe, is addressed in, is it in new section 1?
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do apologize. I thought we were talking about surveyors, but I see now we're talking about training requirements and teacher requirements. So, yes, that is adjusted. We'll stand for questions.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Thank you. So my question still stands concerning in-service, which is not the same as surveyors. And so that's why I asked about that specifically now in the bill, the monitoring that's required when it comes, are the expectations of approval that are now in this bill.
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The hours that are currently required are 16 hours. As we mentioned in 2017, those were 5. They've ratcheted it up year to year. In the same survey that I mentioned, and again, I have extra copies on my desk, so I would encourage you to come and look for yourself. But over a fourth of the respondents said that the training hours were a barrier to them. They didn't, and they didn't always find them helpful either. So right now, 8 of those 12 hours have to be KDHE specified. Something that we heard from providers was that we spend a lot of time in professional development, but those hours don't count because certain programs are hard. It takes a long time to get through the KDHE system to get the star of approval as a KDHE specified course. So we allowed for them to seek some of those professional development hours outside of only KDHE specified courses.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Well, I'd like to share with the body that a couple of things. One, within this bill now, anything has to be approved by KDHE, which currently you do your in-service and it's checked at the time of your renewal of your license by the surveyor. It does not have to be run by KDHE. And when it's mentioned about professional development and access to professional development, there's a multitude of opportunities for professional development. There's ks.gov, which KDHE contracts with ks.gov, and there's also Child Care Aware, and there's also kccto.org. I just went on there today. It's very easy to use. It lists training after training after training, whether on-site or in person. So saying that there's a lack of opportunities or access to training is definitely not correct. But this does put in place that now that training would have to be run by KDHE, which I've often heard that we want less government intervention, and this certainly would put another layer of the department overseeing that very thing. I do have another question, and it's about what we have in statute, what you're proposing to be in statute. This deals with class size, it deals with footage, it deals with parent-to-teacher ratio, it deals with training and requirements, and use of hygiene products. And so I was wondering if you could provide with us an example of other agencies that the state oversees that we have these kinds of things in statute.
Senator Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did check with the revisor. The hours are currently required to go through the KDHE process. And I'm not the one saying that I want more flexibility in terms of what classes I can take. That's coming directly from providers. As far as the next question, I would like to yield to the senator from, Sedgwick.
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I guess I'd counter the question back to the carrier from Wyandotte. I mean, we have regulations all the time on different various things. Just today in Fed and State, we're having hearings on election bills and talked about how we have so many specifications on where you can place a sign, you know, who can be an election or poll watcher, and where can they be placed and located. We put restrictions in the books all the time as a legislature. So I guess I would ask the senator from Wyandotte, does she believe we should just delegate all authority over to the Department of, to the executive branch of government?
Senator from Wyandotte.
Thank you. Well, my question stands. We have a lot of different facets that we deal with in government, and I'm just asking, since we're now looking at a child care licensing, that having KDHE handle the rules and regs, which has been in place for many, many years, and they have adjusted and had flexibility and granted over 600 waivers since 2019. But now with this kind of legislation, that would not be available. So we're looking at class size, we're looking at square footage, we're looking at pupil to teacher ratio, we're looking at training and training and requirements. We're looking at use of hygiene products and putting it in a statute. So my question still persists. What other large groups have we done that same thing to in statute?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was mentioned that the reason why we allow departments to put into place regulations is so they can be flexible, so they can move quickly. And that's the opposite of what's been happening here on this issue, which is why we are having to address that issue today with this legislation. As you mentioned hygiene, you know, the reason why hygiene is even mentioned in Section 12 of the bill is because current regs say shall, and we're just saying may. It's optional. Certainly if providers want to continue to do that, they may. However, again, this bill is because those departments are refusing to adjust. And as legislators, we have no recourse to make changes unless we do something in statute, and that is why we have to do this today. Thank you.
Senator from.
Well, as legislators, we actually do. And last year, we passed legislation HB 2087, which affects KSA 77-415, that the legislature put in place, and they asked for every agency to review by 2024 their rules and regulations. So we, as a body, did this just last year. And KDHE is one of those departments that are agencies that we directed to review their rules and regulations, which they are doing. And when they went out, and of course, as we all know, and we find out through pieces of legislation like this even more about, but as we know, there is a process in place that when a agency is going to change rules and regulations, they have to put them out for a period of time for public review. And when KDHD did that, and this has been, and I think the senator from Shawnee was referring to that, when they did that, they did get responses back. And they did get responses that caused them to then look at those again, and those responses were, when they looked at changing regulations, a lot of the responses were the providers did not like that. So they wanted it looked at again. And so that's why they haven't moved forward, or they're continuing to work on asking for public input, which is what exactly they should be doing. But we as a body pass legislation, ask agencies to review the rules and regulations, and then we are coming along before that actually occurs and taking everything and putting it into statute. So the problem with this is that once it's in statute, there's no flexibility. So those 600 plus waivers that were granted since 2019, that would not be available because this bill, as proposed, ties the hands of the Kansas Department of Health and Environment when it comes to licensures. There's a lot, I mean, I do have a lot of concerns about the numbers and the rate and the raising of the proportion of infants to one provider. I will ask a question about the term toddler, and could you share with us that definition and how it's changed in this bill?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first and foremost, talking about why we're putting this in statute again, it's because the Department of Health is doing nothing. Last year they told us to wait. We're going to do this in regs, which we waited. They put forth regulations. They brought them before the Legislative Joint Committee on Rules and Regs in October, and now they withdrew them. So where are we at? Are we going to wait again? I mean, what do? Go back home to our constituents and say, sorry, the people at the Department of Health and Environment told us to wait. So the question about toddler. So infants, currently regs say newborns to 18 months, it's been lowered to 12. Toddlers, 2.5. Oh, sorry, I yield back to the Senator from Wyandotte if she's waiting.
That's not your definition.
I'd be happy to let you point me to the page where you're explaining it. I hope, sorry, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, the bill has changed from the original draft. The senator from Wyandotte might be looking at the old definition about toddlers being able to walk at 9 months. That has been removed from the bill. So the current language in this new bill does not have that in there. It's just you must be 12 months of age. Unless she can point me to a new page that says otherwise.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Thank you, and thank you to the Senator from Sedgwick. I guess that's just another example of when a bill is substantially altered in committee yesterday and is on the floor today. And I had looked at the bill in depth, and I had gone through this bill again, but I'm very concerned. But as the senator said, it's now lowered the age of infant from 18 months to 12 months, and which again talks to a safety issue, because now we've increased the number of children that can be under a provider, and also changed the definition for infant. So this is just one more layer of change that has occurred within this bill. There is another section that I wanted to ask you about, and that's the new Section 8. Could you expound on that?
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to yield to the Senator from Shawnee, the pilot program. That is something she's been working on, and I will let her discuss it. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As far as the infant changes, one of the things that was added was that any in-home care provider caring for up to 4 infants to age 12 months has to have some of their training on specified infant care. And the bill was worked Monday, so 48 hours ago. The pilot programs was brought forth. There are a lot of people who have said, we would maybe like to specialize in something such as only infant care, or there's not a lot of wiggle room for centers that are more mid-size. You can either be a small center or a large center. There's also not a lot of wiggle room if you're much larger and maybe attached to a business. And so we heard about people wanting this opportunity to do pilot programs so that we can experiment with some new solutions in this area.
Senator from Wyandotte.
And doesn't the KDHE already have that ability?
Senator from Shawnee.
So they currently have the ability to create pilot programs. I haven't seen many coming down the pipeline, so I think we want to encourage that. They also currently have the ability to provide a waiver or an exception. We've been using those words interchangeably, and this bill still allows that, and we want to still encourage that for further innovation and experimentation.
Senator from Wyandotte.
Well, I think there is the question about experimenting on our youngest Kansans, and KDHE already does have that flexibility. This new section with these pilot programs puts pilot programs in statute, and it seems unending. So with that, I have an amendment.
Have you turned it in?
have. It is 1815.
Give us a moment to have it distributed. Are you going to wish to have it read or have it as?
I don't need to have it read. This amendment strikes a new Section 8. It takes out the pilot program. The Secretary of KDHE already has that ability. In fact, it has the funding to do 6 pilots right now that they are working on putting in place. So this language doesn't need to be there. That flexibility is already available. Also, this language would then make this whole thing a pilot ongoing, and it just seems very redundant and unnecessary.
Questions for Senator from Wyandotte. Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do pilot programs all the time, and we do put them in statute. We don't strictly rely on agencies to put these programs in place. I believe we did a mental health pilot program just a few years ago in the state budget. So this is not something that's rare or abnormal. It's something we do all the time in this body. So I will probably be opposing the amendment. Thank you.
Further questions for the Senator from Wyandotte? Seeing none, Senator, you may move your amendment.
So I would just caution the body that this is already available. This is unnecessary. It puts something into this legislation that's totally not necessary. It also creates, since the Secretary already has a grant funding right now, which puts actually some restrictions on what those pilot programs would be. And I think that we should be cautious about what we're putting in place when we put into statute. So with that, I move my amendment.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Amendment fails. We're back on the bill. Senator from Wyandotte.
Thank you. I will just share with this body that as the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Ware said earlier about the caution that we should take when we're looking at this bill. There's been a number of things that have been referenced about that are difficult now, and in fact, I think the most important thing we should be thinking about is that we want quality child care in Kansas, and through this bill, we're not supporting that. We're actually dumbing down child care in Kansas. We're not talking to quality. We're not talking to safety. We're not talking to, the importance of a child-teacher ratio. We're not thinking at all about brain development, and between the ages of 0 and 5, 80% of the brain development there should be if our children, which we know, many of them are spending a good part of their day in childcare, and we should be wanting that to be a quality learning environment. This legislation doesn't support that. Earlier, the senator from Shawnee referred to looking for daycare. This bill has nothing to do with home daycare. That daycare is still out there. That's not being addressed or if you only have 1 or 2 children, that's not being addressed in any way at all. Our family daycare, those choices are still available. And as many of us know, maybe we didn't deal with it last year, but probably all of you, except I hate to say, usually it is the mother that deals with this more than the father. So as a mother, that choosing to use a neighbor for your child's care when you're, working, or when you're, in my case, I was going to school, would be something, and you wouldn't have to look at a licensed facility. But if we're looking at what's licensed in our state and we should be, one, I think having this bill takes out getting a license and not having to pay for it. Well, I would challenge that a lot of people in this room, whether they're an insurance agent or a teacher or a realtor, have a license, and they are paying for that annual license. That's an investment in their in the industry that they're part of, and it's also a little bit a stake in the game. So saying that shouldn't happen with childcare, I think is it helps to, one, fund the program, and two, it makes sure that that provider is invested in lots of different ways, and funding is one of them. It was mentioned about not having enough online availability for in-service. That is not true. You can go to the sources yourself, many of which ks.gov. You can pull it up right now, and you can see that there's a wealth of materials available there for providers to go to, and they're accessible. Child care, I could ask everybody to raise their hand if they're a parent, but we know child care is demanding. And just think about if you have 1 or 2 or 5 children, and if they are all under the age of 2.5, and what the care would look like, and how many people would you want, or do you want to be doing that all day, every day? And what would your day look like if you're providing that care? The children of Kansas deserve to have the attention of a well-trained caregiver that has the capacity to provide high-quality care. And increasing the child and adult ratio and lowering the number of training hours is downright dangerous and a huge step backwards from where we've come and where we want to go. We should be looking forward. We shouldn't be looking back to 1980. And I've heard used that 49 other states have something different, but I know that's only in relation to a child to infant care. I don't know where that is in relation to all other child care, because I've never, ever seen that stat. So I think that we're not allowing the process to work as it should be. And one of the things that hasn't been mentioned is also when it comes to some child care, for example, Head Start, if they have, if a child care center has Head Start slots there, they won't be increasing their capacity because they'd be out of compliance with the federal government and they would lose their funding. So that's another issue for our child care providers as well. They have to be, if they're doing that, they'd have to be looking at their funding. So want to keep that in mind as we look at this kind of legislation. This is a dramatic step because, just as I said about these things that are being put into statute, we don't have that in there for our prisons. They're under rules and regs. We don't have that in there for our nursing homes. It's under rules and regs. We don't have that in there for our hospitals. It's under rules and regs. We don't have that in there for our schools. It's under rules and regs. But we want to do that for child care providers without any, what it seems, limited thought to whether this is a safe environment that we're talking about or not. KDHE has been, that's their responsibility, that's their job, and they continue to look at it. And we, as part of our process, have put in place that we want public input. And just as was mentioned, yes, they got public input, and yes, that made them go back to the drawing table so they can go out for new public input, because the response from providers was that we don't like some of those changes that you've recommended, and we want them to be looked at again. And yet here we're going to put in legislation, and we don't have that input. We don't have that 900 providers providing us with input. Maybe 1, maybe 2, maybe 3, but not 900. So we should be using that as our guide and not rushing to judgment. I'm going to just end with this because I thought this was pretty interesting to think about. It came from a provider saying, increasing the number of children will lead to low quality care. In this bill, you want to have a 12-to-1 with 2.5-year-old children and 1 provider. There's no way that one person can give those 12 children the care they need efficiently. So here's the daily schedule. 7 to 8 a.m. drop off. 8 to 8:30 breakfast. Have you ever tried to feed 12? You got to clean up after them. 8:15 to 9:15, changing diapers or potty training. 9:15 to 10:30, outside time, learning time. Hopefully, if you don't have someone you need to change again. If this happens, then you will have to bring everyone in from outside again and let them play inside while you change the one child. 10:30 to 11:15, diaper changing, potty training. 11:15 to 11:45, lunch, just like breakfast, cleaning tables, chairs, and floor. 11:45 to 12:30, getting ready for nap time, changing anyone who needs to be changed. And then get all 12 to lay down at the same time. 12:30 to 2:30, getting everyone to sleep, work on lesson plans, clean the room, restock diapers, wipes. 2:30 to 3:15, diaper changing, potty training, putting all 12 cots away. 3:15 to 3:45, snack, just like breakfast and lunch, cleaning tables, chairs, and floor. 3:45 to 4:30, outside play time. 4:30 to 5:15, diaper changing, potty training. 5:15 to 6, outside time or play time in the room, and hopefully pick up. That's a day and 1 provider. So you can see that that might wear on someone who's making $10.80 an hour. So how long are they going to stay? That's one of our biggest issues, turnover. So if we really want to help our daycares, we'd be talking about funding. We'd be talking about salaries. That's the only way we're going to keep people in the industry. We had responses from daycare providers saying they don't have as many, they could have a higher capacity, but they don't have staff. This isn't going to bring staff. This bill needs a lot more work. It is not ready for prime time.
Senator from Sedgwick, you wish to respond?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. She said a lot that I went to try to respond to. I probably will miss something. But she mentioned insurance agents' fees. I want to ask her, has she ever asked Senator from Montgomery how much he has to pay every year on that insurance fee? I hear it's really high. No. No, so she hit on several things. 1, wages. One way to increase wages is slots. I mean, if you have 1 to 4 infants, and let's just say $250, that's probably below average in Kansas on how much you pay for an infant for childcare weekly. If that's 4 weeks a month, that's $1,000 extra a month, $12,000 a year for that provider. That's wage increase. She mentioned earlier again about the children, toddlers. You know what? It was the Department of KDHE that actually proposed moving the age from 18 months to 12 months for infants. And that's what this bill does. It's nothing new. It's nothing surprising. It's not rushed. It's been out there for quite a while for providers to see and everyone out here. Brain development. I'm a member of the Early Childhood Caucus that the senator from Wyandotte chairs, and I admire her passion for childcare because I share her passion. We all want good childcare. I firmly believe, and I've seen it with my own oldest child, brain development and the importance of good early childhood education. But this bill does not impede that. In fact, it increases it. Because if there's no childcare or no spot for that child to go, there's no brain development happening. There's no stimulation, potentially. I mean, that is why this bill is necessary, to increase access so we can have those good things. In fact, tomorrow I'm speaking on the childhood literacy resolution because I believe so passionately about that. And this bill increases access for children. This bill empowers providers. No provider has to increase their ratios. No provider, center particularly, has to lower the education requirements or experience requirements for their staff. And heck, the providers, a center can require a PhD if they want to teach a child. Every center is empowered to make that decision that's best for them. This is just getting government out of the way, cutting some of the red tape, and on the fee that's paid every year. This was just hopefully removing one small hurdle for providers. That's all it was trying to do, was just help providers. They're already on the margins. It was mentioned by the Senator from Wyandotte that wages are low, and it was hopeful that, hey, if we can save $150, my goodness, the provider will be better off for it instead of the state collecting it. So there was a lot said, but you know, I share her passion. I really do. I think this bill increases access for Kansas children. Thank you.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, I've been listening to the debate really closely, and like others have said, you know, my wife and I, we are living this, and no doubt there is a real challenge around childcare in our family. We've been on wait list. We've had problems finding the care that we need for the hours that we need it. But this bill, I just want to tell you, is not the answer, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I actually think this bill is quite dangerous. At its core, the main thing that this bill does is it increases ratios. So it's really about cramming more children in a smaller space and having them supervised by less well-trained staff. That's at its base, that's what this bill is about. It's basically saying, let's just stack Kansas kids in these facilities and just pack them in there like sardines, as many as we can, with less qualified staff. And I would urge the body, Mr. Chair, think about what's not in this bill. I mean, we've already had it pointed out to us by another member, but there's nothing in this bill that's going to increase child safety. There's nothing in this bill that's going to increase the number of licensed staff we have, like better pay. You know, we just got notified this week that one of our child's teachers is leaving because she got a job where she can work from home for better pay. That's why people are leaving, and this bill doesn't even address this. I mean, it's just a very incomplete approach to a very complex problem. We need a comprehensive approach. You know what else is not in here? And you know, the senator can say we all want kids to have brain development. Of course we do. But there's nothing actually in the bill that is going to enrich children's educational experience. We know how critical those years are. And there's nothing in here that's going to help us provide a better experience so we have more children ready for kindergarten. And that should be the goal. I mean, when my wife and I take our kid to daycare, we're not hoping he just kind of sits there all day and comes back alive at the end of the day. We're hoping that he gets an enriching experience. And this bill completely misses the boat when it comes to doing things that would actually improve that. And finally, a big challenge around childcare is lowering costs for families. That's part of the reason that families are struggling to get childcare and get it when they need it for the hours that they need it, because childcare is so expensive. And this bill, it's another area where this is incomplete. So I think this is a dangerous approach. I think this is an incomplete approach. And I would urge the body to vote this down. Let's get the experts involved. Let's get some recommendations, and let's go to work on this next session. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator from Sedgwick, you wish to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, my microphone apparently went out. I would just, I would encourage the senator from Johnson. I agree. Costs are very high for child care providers. In fact, I would encourage him, we can bring a bill together and we can, we both sit on the Senate Assessment and Tax Committee. We can propose a child care tax credit, something that this state does not have. And I think that is something that we could young families could benefit from. There's a Wall Street Journal article that was published on March 18th, just last week, talking about pricey child care and how it's keeping many parents out of the workforce. Roughly 380,000 workers aged 25 to 54 left jobs since the pandemic. And we know a big fueling factor of that is because of the lack of access to child care. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator from Shawnee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm hearing about turnover, not qualified people. And so I need to use this example There's currently a center in Olathe, and they have an individual who's wanting to work there who has a Bachelor of Arts in Elementary Education, a Master's in Curriculum and Instruction with Early Childhood emphasis, a PhD. They're a doctorate in Family Studies with a minor in Early Childhood Curriculum and Instruction. They've taught in grades 1 through 5. They've been a professor at 2 different universities preparing students for the field of early childhood education and teaching and training early childhood teachers. And they've had over 30 years of teaching experience. You know what they've been told by ks.gov? This person cannot teach in the classroom by themselves. This person cannot give the lead teacher a bathroom break. So, and we were hearing this over and over and over. Stormont Vale, they can't utilize people who have years of experience because of the narrow pathways that KDHE has required for people to enter into this field. This individual wanted to do something, and they clarified with me that they've asked KDHE twice. They said, well, you can request a waiver, but it's gonna take at least 90 days. So the current regulation is keeping out qualified workers that want to be in this area, and we're simply opening that up and empowering providers to do what they know how to do. And we need to remember too, it's always a parent's decision whether or not to send them to a child care center. And no matter what happens, that parent always has an option to choose where they want to go.
Further questions for the Senator from Sedgwick? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do appreciate the dialogue today. This is a very important issue. And apparently 85,000 Kansas students don't have, or children don't have access to childcare. And so we must act to do something to address that issue. And this, I believe, is the first step. The rules and regulations that are proposed in this legislation are not much different than what Department of Health and Environment proposed just 6 months ago. We heard exactly from their own words earlier when I opened up about how these rules are reasonable and how it could actually address the crisis that we're facing here in the state of Kansas. I appreciate everyone's attention to this matter. I know everyone's ready to go home. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Suff or House Bill 2344 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify.
As amended.
As amended. You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. Motion carries. Chair recognizes Senator from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
You heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed? Motion carries.
The clerk will read the committee report.
On motion of Senator Alley, the Senate resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders, with Senator Peterson in the chair. Recommended House Bill 2092 be passed. House Bills 2093, 2094, 2130, 2131, and 2042 be amended by the adoption of the committee reports and the bill be passed as amended. House Bill 2344 be amended by the adoption of the committee report, recommending a substitute bill be amended on motion of Senator O'Shea, and the substitute bill be passed as amended.
Chair recognizes Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Peterson, to adopt the committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I move we adopt the committee report.
You have heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The motion carries. The message is from the House. The clerk will read.
Announcing passage of House Bill 2313. House Bill 2313 is an act concerning health and health care.
This constitutes introduction of House Bill 2313. At this time, I'm referring House Bill 2313 to the Committee on Public Health and Welfare. Reports of the standing committees, the clerk will read.
Mr. President, the Committee on Education recommends House Bill 2236 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2016 be amended by substituting with a new bill to be designated as Senate substitute for House Bill number 2016, and the substitute bill be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Public Health and Welfare recommends House Bill 2390 be amended by substituting with a new bill to be designated as Senate substitute for House Bill number 2390, and the substitute bill be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Public Health and Welfare recommends House Bill 2125 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Public Health and Welfare recommends House Bill 2338 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Transportation recommends House Bill 2147 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Transportation recommends House Bill 2160 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Local Government recommends House Bill 2323 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Transparency and Ethics recommends Senate Bill 301 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources recommends House Bill 2039 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2087 be passed, and because the committee is of the opinion that the bill is of a non-controversial nature, be placed on the consent calendar. Mr. President, the Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2304 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Public Health and Welfare recommends House Bill 2288 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends House Bill 2114 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends substitute for House Bill 2121 be passed. Mr. President, the Judiciary recommends House Bill 2350 be amended and the bill be passed as amended.
Are there announcements? Chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Commerce Committee will not be meeting tomorrow. Thank you.
Chair recognizes the senator from Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Tax Committee will be meeting. We will have the hearing on Senate Bill 313 tomorrow, and we will continue questions on Senate Bill 311, and we will work legislation. We also plan to meet on Friday. I know that's a change to the schedule. So thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Public Health will be meeting tomorrow, and we will also be hearing and working bills on Friday. Thank you.
Are there other announcements? Seeing none. The chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Mr. President, and to all that can hear my voice, I invite you to stop by and participate in tomorrow. We will have our annual Literacy Day at the Capitol with different events going on. And then, of course, we will acknowledge them on the Senate floor. They'll be over in the House at 11. But if you can, please stop by. And we'll have the Youth of the Year who did community service work, engaging young people to read. And so it's also with Storytime Village. Literacy Day at the Capitol. Please stop by and say hello. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Seeing no other announcements, the chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Cali, Senator Alley.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. I do have a couple announcements before adjourning. The first, I'd like the body to join with me to wish Chief of Staff Eric Rucker a very happy birthday. Thank you. There will be no EFA on Thursday. We will vote on Thursday's bills on Monday. And Performa will be at 2:30 on Friday. We'll be on Performa Friday at 2:30. And no further announcements. I move the Senate adjourn until 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, March 23rd, 2023.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The motion carries. The Senate is adjourned.